Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We're happy to have you join the conversation as we try to find solutions to a seemingly insurmountable issue. I'm Joe Paul, the Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and we just simply want to be treated fairly. The events over the past weeks, months, years, decades has caused a seismic shift, and now is the time for us to take advantage of the urgency of now. No one understands this better than our 35th General President, Dr. Everett B. Ward, who's going to bring us some greetings. And this conversation, folks, may not solve all of our problems, but we certainly believe it is the first step. So it is a pleasure to introduce our General President, Dr. Everett B. Ward. Stand by. We appreciate you joining us, ladies and gentlemen, and sharing your evening with us as we try to find some solutions. What I want to do is, while we bring Dr. Ward back in, I want to take this, wait a minute, here we go. Here's our General President.
Good afternoon, Brother Paul, and brothers, good afternoon. So glad to be with you today as we have this very meaningful discussion. I want to thank all of our panelists who are with us tonight and for their leadership. We certainly want to thank each one of you and looking forward to your in-depth presentation tonight. And so I am going to listen intently to your recommendations on how we turn our actions into the reality that we need to have as we move forward. So, brothers, thank you so much for your leadership, and thank each one of you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Ward, Brother President. Coming up next, we want to introduce Brother Mark Morial, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Urban League. He also served as mayor of New Orleans from 1994 to 2002, president of the United States Conference of Mayors in 2001, and Louisiana state senator from 92 to 94. Most recently, he's the author of the Gumbo Coalition, 10 leadership lessons that help you inspire, unite, and achieve. Brother Mark Morial, it's great to have you with us this evening.
Brothers, can you hear me?
We can hear you, brother.
Thank you. First of all, let me say to all the brothers, this is not Kappa red. This is Urban League red, because our colors are red, black, and white. Just for the record, I don't want anyone to think I'm acting out of school tonight. But let me thank Brother Ward. I want to thank all the brothers for joining in this very important conversation tonight. And Alpha Phi Alpha, at its very essence and its core and its mission, is about the sustainability, the accomplishments, the achievements, and the survival of Black men in America. So no discussion we have ever had or will have is more central to the very essence of what the Seven Jewels envisioned at Cornell University in 1906 than this conversation about police misconduct, police brutality, police violence, and the culture and the indifference and the explicit and implicit bias which enables it and fuels it. We're at a moment of transformation in American history. Every brother has to make sure his voice is heard. His voice is heard. His voice is heard to say enough is enough. It's time to reform the police system in the United States. It's time to reform the criminal justice system in the United States. It's time to purge this cancer of institutional and structural racism from the institutions of America. For our generation, this is our fight. For our generation, this is our time. In the 1960s, great alpha men like Thurgood Marshall and Martin Luther King and many, many, many others led the way as this nation took a giant leap from segregation to what they felt was freedom. We know 50 plus years later that the advent of, as Michelle Alexander calls it, a new Jim Crow. A new Jim Crow has emerged in America. It manifests itself in the policing systems, in the systems of criminal justice, the inequities in the health system revealed by COVID, the inequities in the educational system, and the certain inequities in the system of economics and wealth in this country. So this discussion is important. And what I hope is true to the spirit of Alpha Phi Alpha is that we're not mired simply in a paralysis of analysis, but that we are embracing of the work we must do to change it, the steps we can take to rectify it. And right now, I'll say this, I expect that the Congress of the United States, that there will be introduced in the Congress of the United States, in the House, in short order, a comprehensive police reform bill. And it'll be our duty, our responsibility to maintain the public pressure to ensure that it passes the House and there isn't continued recalcitrance, foot dragging in the United States Senate. We must act. We must act now.
Thank you, Brother Mark Morial, for those kind words and poignant words. We appreciate you. And the brothers don't hold anything against you. You're one of our favorite alphas. You're one of our sons, brother. So thank you so much for joining us, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to our panel moment. And I would like to introduce some of our panel guests who have graciously joined us this evening. As I introduce them, they will show up on your screen and we will have a great conversation. This is part one of the conversation and then we'll shift over to part two. So, and we expect to have all of this done during this time. So, first up is Brother Dr. Raphael Warnock, who's running to represent Georgia in the U.S. Senate. He holds a PhD and is an ordained minister. For the last 14 years, Brother Warnock has served as senior pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, the former pulpit of Brother Dr. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He's also the youngest pastor selected to serve in that leadership role at the historic church. Brother Warnock, we're so glad to have you, brother.
Great to be here with you. Thank you so much for the invitation, and kudos to our ever visionary President Everett Ward for bringing us together at this time.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Thank you so much for joining us, brother. Coming up next, Brother Dr. Cameron Webb, who's running for the U.S. House of Representatives to represent Virginia's 5th District, uniquely works as a practicing physician, lawyer, and professor at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, where he attended college and was also initiated into the Iota Beta chapter of Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated. In addition, he serves as the Director of Public Health Policy and Equity at the UVA School of Medicine. He's also a member of Gamma Alpha Lambda chapter of the fraternity. Brother Webb, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Brother Paul. Looking forward to the conversation.
Indeed, indeed. And let's see. I believe we have one more guest, Brother Michael Blake, who's running for the U.S. House of Representatives to represent New York's 15th District. He currently serves as both a New York Assemblyman from the 79th District and a vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. Brother Blake is a life member of the fraternity and is a 2001 Alpha Mu chapter initiate and member of the Rho Psi Lambda chapter in the Bronx. Now, Brother Blake will be joining the conversation shortly, but I figured I would get the introduction out of the way so we can talk, so we can have a conversation. Is that fair?
Sounds good.
Fantastic. So, my brothers, really quickly, as we talk about the topic, federal policy in the age of COVID-19 and the violent assault on Black men, one of the things that we all have seen, the videos, we've seen the viral videos, we've all shaken our heads, we all are tired, we're exhausted. And one of the things that we hope is that we can find some answers and some solutions to help at least give brothers peace of mind. So the first thing I want to do is ask you all if you wouldn't mind sharing a couple of words about your reaction. How do you feel as brothers? How do you feel with the images that you've seen over the past couple of weeks? Where are you? Where are you mentally? Where are you? Brother Webb, if you don't mind starting us off, and then Brother Warnock will round us out.
Yeah, it's really difficult, to be honest. And you mentioned that I'm a practicing physician and I work at the University of Virginia's hospital taking care of coronavirus patients. And so the first thing that I noticed when I was taking care of patients in the hospital was that so many of our coronavirus patients were Black. And we saw the stories rolling out about Black individuals all across this country dying, the 70% in Chicago, the 70% in the state of Louisiana, and really all over, the disproportionality. And so we're already facing Black people who can't breathe and who are dying disproportionately. And so to see this video of this brother George Floyd being murdered, over the course of nearly 9 minutes, it's tragic. But I think just yet another reason why brothers in this country can't breathe and why Black people are dying. And so I think it's that re-traumatization. It's the fact that when you see the video of George Floyd, you also remember the video of Ahmaud Arbery running. You also remember, Philando Castile, and you remember Tamir Rice, and you remember Trayvon Martin, and all these others. It's every single time we run back through that list of our fallen brothers. And I think that trauma is significant. And so, not only that, but you've got so many people reaching out to you as Alpha brothers. We know often we're leaders in our communities. And so many people are reaching out saying, what should we do? What do we do? And so, there's a lot of weight. And I know that we've got broad enough shoulders to carry it. But I think that but this is a tough moment for all of us. And I think it activates all of us. We really want to lean in and get something meaningful done.
You're absolutely right, Brother Webb. Now is the time to act. And we're doing just that. Brother Warnock, what are your thoughts?
Yes. Again, thank you so much for having me with you. I appreciate this conversation. We are wrestling really with two pandemics. We are dealing with COVID-19 and what I called in my sermon last Sunday at Ebenezer Church, COVID-16-19. the legacy of slavery that began when 50 some Africans arrived on the shores of Jamestown, Virginia. Our nation has wrestled with this virus that literally kills people. It targets Black people, but racism also kills white people. Racism kills old people and young people. Racism shackles the hope, the promise, and the possibility of our country. And so we've been wrestling with this for some 400 years. We thought that perhaps we had chased the virus into remission. Some thought we had during the bloody conflict of the Civil War. And for a little while, it went into a short remission. And during that brief period, there was the sunlight of the possibility of freedom. In fact, Hiram Revels became the first African American elected to the United States Senate, a preacher, I should say, in 1870. But soon that virus mutated and came back with a vengeance in Jim Crow segregation. And for nearly 100 years, our folk were wrestling with this new and improved virus. Douglas Blackman calls it the re-enslavement of African Americans. We thought that the civil rights movement had vaccinated us against the virus, but then comes the new Jim Crow, as Mark has already pointed out. Michelle Alexander talks about mass incarceration in the age of colorblindness. And so what I've been saying to folks in the midst of this is that while we rightfully focus on the issue of police brutality, we should be careful that we don't focus narrowly on the issue of policing and police brutality. Police brutality is a consequence of this larger public policy problem of mass incarceration. I see it as the central domestic moral issue of our time and the most obvious challenge to the work and the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. The United States of America, the land of the free, warehouses 25% of the world's prisoners. We have built a massive prison industrial complex. Nobody else comes even close to the numbers of people in American prisons. And I submit that if you build a system that large and you keep it and you maintain it, it's got to eat. And this system consumes Black bodies. And until America stops investing in the machinery of punishment and control of Black bodies and reinvest in our people, tragically, we're going to find ourselves here over and over again. That's why I'm inspired by these young people, especially who are standing up all across the United States of America in this transformational moment and saying we can do better than this.
Completely agree with you, Brother Warnock. Brother Webb, when we're thinking about legislation, do you believe that there should be legislation that supports mandatory minimums for police officers who murder innocent, unarmed Black men, women, or anyone in their custody for that matter?
Well, I understand the interest in something like that. I think when we always say justice delayed is justice denied. And so that idea that at the very least, there's going to be some form of justice, people serve some time. I think that is there's some consolation in that. But I think for me, in the broader criminal justice reform paradigm, I mean, when we talk about criminal justice reform, remember, we have to have meaningful reform in order to accomplish our goals of equity. We have to have meaningful reform in policing, in prosecution, in the adjudication, in the sentencing, in our correction system, and then ultimately in reentry as well. And so across that broader paradigm, what I always remember is that mandatory minimums have been weaponized against Black men historically, particularly with drug and gun offenses. And so, I'm able to be more effective in my advocacy to eliminate those mandatory minimums if I try to be pretty pure about it and saying we shouldn't have these mandatory minimums. Now, that being said, I do think there need to be meaningful sentencing guidelines made by expert commissions for these police use of force issues, and I think that's going to help give people that sense of justice, but not undermine our efforts to address mandatory minimums in other spaces.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that, Brother Webb. Brother Warnock, you have comments you want to add on that? Do you believe that and Brother Blake is joining us now. But do you believe that the legislation should support some mandatory minimums for police officers like Derek Chauvin, who committed murder?
I agree with Brother Webb. The police should be held accountable, but just in principle, I am opposed to mandatory minimums. As he points out, this has been weaponized against Black people in general, and we've seen the damage that this has done. I think we make a mistake if we say get rid of mandatory minimums over here, but we want them over there. I think we've got some good tools if we'd make use of them. I think that this idea that district attorneys who need police officers to make their cases week in and week out, that we would leave the prosecution of police officers to their colleagues in the district attorney's office is something that we definitely need to take a close look at. We need some kind of independent review process whenever you have police using deadly force where civilians are concerned. There were many other great ideas that came out of the 21st Century Policing Commission of the Obama administration. Those ideas were apparently thrown in the trash by this administration, and we're seeing the result of that. There are things that we can do certainly to hold police accountable, and we ought to do that.
Fantastic. I see Brother Blake with us. I wanted to get his comments on a couple of things. We talked about mandatory minimums, and what comes with that is incarceration, right? And so we all know the facts about Black men and how we're disproportionately incarcerated. I mean, Black men are incarcerated at 5 times more the rate than our white counterparts. So, Brother Blake, if you would lead us off in this answer, what next steps would you propose to end mass incarceration?
Good evening, brothers. First of all, just trying to get resettled here. As you can see, I'm literally been outside. Brother Webb, Brother Warnock, Brother Paul, good to see everybody. Look, I think before we dive into the policy, we got to talk about the humanity. And I'm coming from watching right now the continuation of how racism applies itself. We're watching in real time. It's only been 10 days since George Floyd, and it seems like the world is burning. So the reason I'm just coming in from outside, and forgive my not being an alpha attire, but I think doing the work is alpha attire right now, is that we have probably about 100 or so people that are out protesting, that are demanding police accountability. But we have an 8 o'clock curfew tonight. And to your question, Brother Paul, around mandatory minimums, what goes through my mind is what happens to that young brother, young sister that's outside at 8:01, where they were just trying to get home from work, or they were just trying to peacefully protest. And maybe they had a minor offense back in the day. Maybe they had something that happened where they were in the wrong place, wrong time. Should they literally lose their future and their hope because of a few minutes? No, I don't think so. And the blunt reality is, over and over again, we see white folk who have the exact same inference for somehow, some way, get probation and get leniency. And so for those of us that are looking to change the game, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of frustration. But the people you elect to office are the ones that are going to help change this. The the ones who are on the ballot this year will determine what kind of hope we have, whether it's in Virginia, whether it's in Georgia, whether it's here in New York. Who are the people that are getting elected to the House and elected to the Senate? Who are the ones getting elected to DA? Who are the ones that are getting elected to prosecution opportunities? Like, that's how we're going to change these laws that we care about. And yeah, there's tactical things. For example, we spent a lot of our time today in New York preparing and planning around how do we repeal 50A, which is a law that's on the books that restricts the personnel disciplinary records of officers. Now, you may be asking me, how is that tied to mandatory minimums and what's going on with charges and sentencing? Well, if there's an officer who has a history of messing with us and can be a little trigger happy, a little baton happy, little knee in the back happy, knee in the neck happy, it could quickly spiral the circumstance that could lead to some of us going to jail for a long period of time. So it's unfair. And this is how we need to focus our energy. And I think, our opportunity this year is to be much more involved in understanding the policies on the ground, separate apart what's happening nationally. Equally, it's electing brothers to office that are trying to do the right things. And lastly, it's really understanding the humanity moment. I think a lot of us are scared to go outside right now, if we're being very honest. We could be prideful of all we want, but you go outside, they hunt you. You're inside, they hunt you. You got a mask on, they hunt you. And we're the only ones that seem to get charged.
And we definitely have to do. Go ahead.
If we want to make the changes happen, it's like right.
You're absolutely right. And I'd love to hear Brother Warnock's perspective on voter turnout, because we can't necessarily blame, Black voter turnout can't be blamed for Democratic losses. I think we can all agree. But we definitely can't ignore the fact that Black voter turnout is down significantly since Obama, and it's even down even lower amongst Black men, which is a demographic that represents our fraternity. And 1 in 6 college-educated Black men voted for the gentleman in the White House currently. And how important is it to cast a vote in every single election when you think about not just the presidential election, but local and state and Senate, et cetera? How important is it, and how can we increase that Black voter turnout? Brother Warnock, and then Brother Webb, and then Brother Blake.
Thank you so much. It's very important that we work on this issue of voter education, voter registration, and mobilization. And in recent days, I've added one more thing, and that's verification. And I've added verification because they're playing all kinds of tricks in states like Georgia, where you think you're registered and you're not. They're literally purging the voter rolls through processes called exact match and voter purges, all of these various tricks, which is why my church is one of the plaintiffs suing the state of Georgia right now for its voter suppression tactics. So that's the challenge. The good news is that at least in the state of Georgia, we are seeing the growth of the American emerging electorate. We actually had a higher voter turnout in 2018, a mid-year, than we did in 2016. Stacey Abrams, with whom I've worked for the last several years, came within 55,000 votes of winning in the state of Georgia, just a little over a point. We've registered hundreds of thousands of new voters of color in this state. And in this upcoming election that will make me the next United States Senator from the state of Georgia, we have 300,000 new African-American, Latinx, and AAPI voters available to us in this election that we didn't have in 2018. So hear me now. So Stacey lost by 55,000 votes, and I'm looking at 300,000 voters of color in this election that we didn't have in 2018. And so this will be a turnout election. I think it will be a change election. And I think we got to continue to make the case to help our people to remember, if you ever doubted whether elections matter, everybody ought to know by now that elections have consequences. In fact, elections have life and death consequences. The coronavirus was not created by Donald Trump in a laboratory, but it certainly is doing a lot more damage than it had to in our country. The land of technology and wealth, the preeminent power on the planet, has 1/3 of the cases and 1/3 of the deaths. That is the consequence of leadership, or a lack of leadership, and a lack of and leadership decisions. So we're working hard. My church registers voters all the time, and I think pastors need to get engaged on this front. Our various fraternities and sororities, and I finished voting early today, and then I sent out a video reminding people that a vote is a kind of prayer. It is a kind of prayer about the world, kind of world that you want to live in. And our prayers are stronger when we pray together. And so we've got to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to exercise their right to vote. And so we got to fight against these voter suppression laws. We've got to remind our people that somebody is trying to take their vote. And Michael Blake knows this. In 2012, as I recall, the only thing that motivated Black people more than Barack Obama to turn out in 2012 was the reality that somebody was trying to take their vote. When they were surveyed, this idea, because it is in our gut from these years of oppression, that you're trying to take Black people's vote, help to turn them out. And so what I intend to do in the state of Georgia over the next few months is mobilize a broad multi-racial coalition that I will need to win a statewide election, but also to remind voters of color, young people, and the broader electorate that there are folk who are afraid of what will happen in America if everybody actually turns out to vote. It is the death rattle of a system that is dying. And I think it's responding so violently and desperately now because it knows that it is breathing its last gasp. We ought to go to the polls and finish the job.
You said a word there, Rev. Brother Webb, absolutely. We have a national, Brother Dr. Webb, we have a national program. One of our national programs is A Voteless People is a Hopeless People, right? And so, Brother Warnock hit the nail on the head. One of the things we definitely want to do is increase voter turnout. How can we do that? What strategies can we use to get people to the poll? Because we have some amazing candidates who are running, and we need change, and we need to get folks out to the polls. What do you suggest we do?
Well, first I want to say I'm glad you brought up A Voteless People is a Hopeless People, because we're coming up on 90 years of that refrain and the impact of that program. And yet and still, there are a lot of places where it's pretty hopeless for Black Americans. And I live in a congressional district here in Virginia that's the largest congressional district in the Commonwealth. It's actually larger than the state of New Jersey. And it runs from just outside of DC all the way down to the North Carolina border. And what's so incredible to me is this district has never had a Black representative, but there are 9 counties with more than 35% of the population that's African American. So think about that. How is that even possible? It's only possible through some of the things that you've heard earlier. It's only possible because of voter suppression. It's only possible because of mass incarceration and the fact that so many of our brothers have lost their voting rights. And so the reality is, for us to make sure that people can vote, we have to absolutely fix the system. In parts of my Commonwealth where people are literally intimidated to vote at the polls, those are things that we have to address. So some of that is going to play out through the state legislatures. And in Virginia, it's kind of interesting. We have elections every single year. So our state elections are actually in odd numbered years. So they don't correspond with these federal elections. but it's so important that our vote is used in every one of the elections. I think there's a hierarchy in our society of what elections are worth voting in, and the highest is presidential years. So 2020, it's a good time to be running, right? Because it's a high turnout year. But those 2018 elections, those midterm elections, shape critical policy. That is the way that President Obama lost that mandate in 2010 to accomplish so many of his policy agenda. And where he focused on the recovery and then on passing healthcare, the rest of his agenda was really stunted because of those midterm elections. That's critical. And then at the state level, right? And I want to bring it back to this conversation that we're having specifically. State and local elections are going to be so critical in our ability to address this crisis of the murder, the extrajudicial killing of Black men. Some of you probably have heard of this hashtag, this conversation about 8 can't wait. And that's those 8 data-proven policies that can decrease police violence significantly. And that's things like banning chokeholds, requiring de-escalation, requiring warnings before shooting, exhausting all other means before shooting, officers having a duty to intervene. So there are other officers, banning shootings at moving vehicles, requiring the use of force continuum, and then requiring comprehensive reporting. None of those things require action by Congress. That's all local intervention. Here in our county, we hired a Commonwealth's attorney, like the district's attorney, Commonwealth's attorney, who has a very clear stance against mass incarceration. He has taken that prosecutorial, the leeway that he has to make decisions on who to prosecute to address racial disparities in our criminal justice system. Those elections matter dramatically for every single individual in our society. And so what I would say, we know, as we've been for years now, voteless people is a hopeless people, but it's all of these elections. It's all the above. We've got to get it done.
Absolutely. I echo your sentiments. I think we all do. Brother Blake, if you could just round us out with this topic of voting, and how do we get people to the polls to support these outstanding candidates who are running to represent us all?
We got to give people hope that it matters, right? We got to be very clear about the opportunity that we have. Many brothers who are running for House and Senate, for example. We got many brothers who can help change the game. In Washington, I've been telling people a lot. You keep telling me about your frustration about Trump, frustration about Washington. Well, one way to fix that, go elect some alphas. Right? You can really make that very easy. And very concretely, I'm here in the Bronx. I'm running for Congress myself, running to become the first Black person to ever be in Congress from the Bronx. And our primary is in 19 days. And it is nonstop in trying to get there. I think Raphael is before us. I think Georgia is before us, if I remember this correctly. I can't remember. I think they're coming up on Tuesday, if I remember this correctly.
We have a primary on June the 9th. However, I'm not in the primary. I'm running in the special election in November.
Good. And so this is that moment, Brother Paul, where we have to be very direct with everyone of, if you want to change the game, elect your friends. Elect the ones that are in the vineyard. Elect the ones who are doing the work. And, brothers, we all need you. We need you to help us bring this home. You care about criminal justice reform. You should care about what's happening on the federal level in terms of what we talked about, mandatory minimum. You care about health care. You care about minority women-owned businesses. All these things are tied into this. And we can't keep hoping for someone to get in the game. I said to someone earlier today, I don't need you to be my savior. I just need you to be my supporter. Right? And practically, elections are like any small business. It requires money so that you can get your message out and you can mobilize. It requires a message, right? And it requires people. And so for anyone that is wondering why to vote and how to get more people involved to vote, we are in the middle of a race war. We are in the middle of a scenario where Black men are being hunted. What else do we need to see to go vote? I don't know if you can see, but this is my shirt here. And the shirt says, I'm just gonna pull it up. My Blackness is a blessing from God. And so I don't want us to just talk about the 60s, the 1920s, 1930s. Let's talk about 2020. And that's how we can change the game in a very real way. So we're asking for you to help us. We want you to be involved. And, you know, brothers, you know, our BlakeForCongress.nyc is our website. BlakeForCongress.nyc. That's what we got going. But support all of us, Brother Webb, Brother Warnock. Well, Brother Warnock, you know, came with multiple. That's what I'm talking about right there, right?
Real boss.
The real boss. I'm talking about.
She said, I'm sitting here. I don't care what you're doing. You know, your kids don't care who you're talking to.
That's it.
Listen, brothers, I got to run and get on another one of this Hollywood Square gatherings, but I'm so proud to be out, and I've enjoyed this conversation. Please, if you want to support my campaign, go to warnock4georgia.com. Warnock, F-O-R-G, you know, spelled all the way out, .com. And we're going to win in November and make a difference for all of our people and for the country. Thank you. It's so great to be on here with my brothers. We're all going to win.
Thank you, bro, Warnock. We certainly appreciate you spending some moments with us, and the best of luck. The brothers are behind you, my brother.
Thank you. Okay.
Fantastic. So, my brothers, as we talk about violent assault, violent assault on Black men, we can't neglect the fact that the assault is not on our bodies alone; it's in our pockets, right? So, the financial shocks of COVID-19 have hit the Black community especially hard. I think we can all agree. Even before COVID-19, Black Americans had an unemployment rate that was almost twice the national rate, and it's much worse now. So what do you propose we do to lessen the impact of this looming recession? And how can we get people who look like us back to work? Brother Webb, you want to start us off, and then Brother Blake?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah. Happy to start there. I think that the recovery process has to be equitable. I think that's one of the key tenets that we have to adhere to. And I think that when I look at small businesses and those that were the hardest hit and those that didn't have access to those PPP funds, a lot of times it's predicated on your pre-existing relationships with banks. It's predicated on systems and structures that have enabled some to succeed and others to have a harder time. And so because we're leaning into systems that are already stacked against us, of course, we're going to see the disproportionality in a moment like this. Because our essential workers disproportionately are people of color, are Black and brown brothers and sisters. Of course, we're going to see the disproportionate impact. So it seems like I'm frozen. Are you still getting me, Brother Blake? Okay, cool. So I think that the disproportionate impact of this pandemic, both in the healthcare consequences and in the economic consequences in this economic recession, they're significant. I think that for us to navigate it effectively, it just means that we create equitable policies. I think that we do have to talk about putting a moratorium on things like debt collections for small businesses so that we can keep businesses afloat. We do have to make sure that we're getting those dollars into the hands of the individuals who need it. And we need to make sure that we're getting both small businesses and individuals. You know, it's going to be critical for us to make sure that we're really thoughtful about that. But yeah, we are going to continue to be the hardest hit, not only on the financial side, but remember the health consequences and the disproportionate health consequences of COVID are also going to exert an economic impact. These hospital visits aren't free. Nobody has told us that these hospital visits are free. And so the truth of the matter is, if Black and brown individuals are disproportionately being hospitalized for COVID, they're going to be facing these bills. And we know that our system has not been particularly kind in forgiving a lot of these debts. And so we have to be vigilant. We have to be thoughtful. We have to be proactive, and we have to be equitable.
Fantastic. Brother,
well, I think when it comes to the economics, and brother General President, always good to see you, my leader. We saw very directly on the federal level, there was not the support through the payroll protection program for our communities. Right, didn't happen in any real way, and it wasn't just in the first tranche where they didn't have funding for our small minority women-owned businesses. It was the lack of access to capital for our community banks as well. And then the next phase of this was that if you had a previous arrest record, you were ineligible. right? So they found multiple ways to block us out the game. And so for us, if we're serious about helping our businesses, helping economics of this, first we got to tell everybody, I know you're upset, I know you're frustrated, but stop looting and destroying our Black and Latino-owned businesses. That doesn't make any sense to me, right? Because they're the ones that are going to suffer. But then we got to make sure we get the funds. We got to have funds that come in from community development financial institutions. We got to find alternatives to capital. We need to be much more creative in that way to help our businesses recover. Any brother that is involved in insurance, you're critical right now, because there's a lot of these businesses that simply do not know how they're going to make it. I was at a business, I did a few tours earlier this week, and this one, family were practically in tears. Their business had just been looted. He said, my insurance lapsed 2 months ago. He's like, what do I do? Right. So one thing we've done is we've created our Bronx community relief effort. And within that effort, we have a small business portal to provide direct funding and grants and zero interest loans to our local businesses. We're partnering up with 100 Black men, which have been providing zero interest loans and grants. Because that's the critical piece. You can't keep telling someone to take on a loan and then hope they'll get that money. That's not going to work. And so we've been very intentional on both fronts. And then lastly, look, we got to have some very real conversations with some of these landlords, with some of the providers of capital, of saying that you're going to have some patience. You can't tell that business, I know you've had no revenue for 3.5 months, but I want you to pay my rent tomorrow. That doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think if we want to talk about how do we help the businesses, that's something we can do. But then tied to this is partnering up with our private sector allies, Facebook, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, PepsiCo. Many of them have been very intentional of getting capital out to our Black businesses. And we need to make sure we're partnering up with them and aligning with them. I know Brother Morial, National Urban League, was doing something similar. That's the way we can provide that help. And this is a town hall of those of us that are running for office. Again, I'm going to keep saying it. The people you elect matter.
That's right.
Right? Like, why did so many people suffer? Because you got a lot of Senate Republicans who don't care about Black people. They made intentional decisions that they understood would lead to our physical and economic health and wealth depreciating in the last 3 months. Because there's no concrete way you can explain, why would I make it harder for you to get capital if I wanted to help you? Other than it's a way to press us out. As we think about how we just celebrated the 99th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre, it wasn't that they just killed people physically. They went after our businesses.
That's right.
It was a very intentional approach. And so it may not be a physical fire in that same way, but the strategies are the same. And so, yes, we've taken the approaches the way we have, but that's why we all have to win. We all have to be involved in these elections this year, up and down the ballot. And I know I speak for Brother Webb. I think those of us that are running for federal office, we're going to be the ones that provide you the most help next year. Because a lot of this is going to come from another economic recovery. This is not going to be the final recovery that's going to happen this year. There will certainly be at least one, if not two more major ones. We think about, and I'll tie this together, my last piece on this, the major thing they did not accomplish was infrastructure. Mm-hmm. The rebuilding of America that's going to have to happen now because of what's happened this year will be trillions of dollars that are going to be moving. And again, who's going to be in these seats to determine where those dollars go? Mm-hmm. So that's why it's all intertwined. And that's why a conversation like tonight is so critical.
Indeed. Poignant comments. I want to take this point of personal privilege to welcome our General President, Everett B. Ward, PhD, to ask our panel members, our brothers, a couple of questions. Dr. Ward.
Thank you, brothers. Brother Webb and Brother Blake, thank you all so much for your leadership. I've listened intensely to your conversations, and Brother Blake talked about businesses and how important that is. Between now and June 23rd, what are the immediate things that both of you need from your brothers? And then I'll go into some of the other issues that you've raised.
Well, I can start just by saying, Brother Blake has said it several times. This is a small business. We need the resources to win. We're down to 19 days before the election. And interestingly, as a physician, as a lawyer, and as a social justice kind of advocate, what's been interesting is that I keep telling people it's like Esther 4:14. Our campaign was built for such a time as this. We're in the middle of a healthcare pandemic, a healthcare crisis, and a crisis of racial injustice. And I think that that's what people have realized. We've had over 3,000 individual donations, raised over $63,000 in the last 2 days, just because of the circumstances that we're in societally. And the thing is, I still have an outside organization that's spending over $300,000 for one of the opponents in my race. Right. So we can do all that we want to do. We can make noise, but understand there are systems and structures that are designed to try to beat us. And so for the brothers, of course, Brother Blake dropped the link. He's a pro. My website is www.drcameronwebb.com. I'll drop it in the comments as well. But I think that's a great place for you to go. Drop $19.06. That makes a difference for me, because our average donation in the last few days has been $18, right? So that's huge. And then the other thing is amplify us. I follow Brother Blake on social media. When he posts something, retweet it, right? When we're getting the word out there, make sure you're sharing it, because those are other people who are going to see our message no matter where they are. They know these are the seats that we need to win, and we need the right people in these seats. So spread the word. And if you got whether it's your time, your talent, or your treasure, help us out.
All right. Thank you. Blake.
Look, Brother Ward, as Brother Webb has just mentioned, Brother Paul, the difference between me going to Congress and not will likely come down to, do we raise another $100,000 in these next 19 days, and practically probably $100,000 the next 10 days, so that you have enough time to get that out and mobilize. We're doing an Alpha fundraiser coming up, I think Saturday night, of brothers will be joining us, I think 7:06 Saturday night. But brothers, look, if you want to be helpful to us, if you're willing to go on to our website, not just for donations, but also to make phone calls. We are running against one person who has about $1 million to spend in the next 3 weeks, and another person who has name recognition because his son is the borough president here. And so, if you're willing, brothers, to go to blake4congress.nyc, the most you can do for federal elections, $2,800. You, of course, I want you to split that up between myself and Brother Webb. We got to show love across the board. But very directly, I need brothers to help donate to us so that we can make sure we have mail and TV and digital and radio the way we want to. And I need, and that's not just brothers, brothers, family members, colleagues, friends, everyone to help us bring this home. And we need people to help make phone calls for us. All of us are home. All of us have these stay-at-home orders. So you have the time to be involved with that. We have great momentum. We have 16 labor unions who've endorsed me, 38 elected officials. We have something special we're building right now. But if you can't tell your story in an adequate way, you can't win these races. So to everybody listening and watching, if you want to help us, of course, anyone in the Bronx, tell them to go vote for us, in which we have absentee voting, early voting, and day of voting, especially, and I should have said this earlier, I don't know why I forgot this, anyone who are lawyers who have any experience with voter protection. This is a very new terrain for us, because we have a presidential election, congressional election, state Senate, state assembly, and a Queensborough president and local races happening. So any lawyers, even if you've never done voter protection before, we welcome your involvement with us. But yeah, donate, please, brothers. blake4congress.nyc, volunteer. And if you need to reach me, because this is a brothers town hall, my email is a very easy one. It is mikeblake06@gmail.com to drop me a note. MikeBlake06@gmail.com for us to be engaged there. I'm not sure if there's a way to put our websites in the live comments, Brother Paul. I'm not seeing how to do that here. But to your question, Brother Ward, that's what's at stake. Mm-hmm. That's what's at stake. And I think we're not direct enough about this. So allow me to be. I think pride gets in the way for a lot of us as Black men, that it is very hard to ask people for help. And, you know, in races like our own, where a lot of times we're up against very well-funded individuals and well-funded causes who don't care about our cause. Sometimes we're reluctant to have that very open conversation. And sometimes we're reluctant to treat this the way it is. This is a small business that ends that day, right? And so don't wait until June 23rd. Help us now. Help us now, brothers. And if you're willing to do that, we can all bring this home for both of us and the other brothers that are running as well.
Great. Thank you, brother. Thank you.
All right. Brother General President, you have one more? Or?
No, that's it. That's it.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So we have the email showing up, mikeblake06@gmail.com. drcameronwebb.com, drcameronwebb.com. And it's Blake for Congress. Is that right?
Blake for Congress, .nyc. Anyone can donate from your personal, and I'll say this for Brother Webb, from your personal accounts, right? Not your corporate accounts, everybody. That's the last thing any of us need right now. And it's $2,800 for the primary, $2,800 for the general election. I'm not sure Brother Webb has a general, but all of us, this is just a primary to get through. Would ask people to go to the site. And to the point that was just referenced there by Seth, yes, we cannot just be involved in presidential elections anymore, everybody. Mm-hmm. We can't. We're learning that lesson. We got to be involved up and down the ballot. And that's how we'll change the game.
Fantastic. So I want to shift gears to COVID-19. That's part of the topic that we're discussing, federal policy in the age of COVID-19 and the violent assault on Black men. And so we know that Black Americans represent 13% of the American population, but nearly 60% of the deaths associated with COVID-19. Obviously, social conditions, structural racism, and so many other factors elevate that risk for COVID-19 diagnosis as well as deaths in our communities. This pandemic has exposed so many vulnerabilities, especially the one of our healthcare system. Should healthcare be a right for all Americans? Brother Webb, we'll start with you. Wait a minute. Is Brother Webb here? Oh, wait, I'm sorry, brother. Here we go. Brother Carter is here. And Carlos Sneeze. Here we go. Fantastic. Wait till Brother Sneed. Good to see you. Brother Carter, great to see you. Fantastic. We're glad that these gentlemen tried.
It's great to be seen, brother.
Indeed. I'll probably introduce you. Brother Melvin Carter is a 1999 Beta Nu initiate and a good friend who was elected to St. Paul, Minnesota as the first African-American mayor in 2017. And he's also the 46th mayor of Minnesota's capital city. Prior to his election, Brother Carter served as St. Paul City Council member and also vice chair of the council. In addition, he was adjunct faculty at University of Minnesota, Duluth, where he taught classes on campaigns, elections at the graduate level. Brother Carter, thank you so much for joining us in this conversation.
Thanks for having me on. I'm a 2000 initiate, though.
2000? Did I give you an extra year? 2000.
That's right. That's all right.
2000. I'm fall 98, so I figured, okay, 2000. So fantastic. 2000 initiate of Beta Nu. And Brother Carlos Sneed, who currently serves as the chapter president of Gamma Xi Lambda in Minneapolis, Minnesota. What we're talking about is you gentlemen are on the ground and you see it head on. And Brother Carter, I'll start off with you. First, thank you so much for joining us. The Los Angeles mayor, says up to $150 million is going to be cut from the police budget and shifted over to programs that support diversity. How will George Floyd and the recent action by police across America affect your budget?
It's a good question, and I apologize. I'm coming in the call late and in the car. At the same time, we actually just came from a community meeting, just came from the memorial service and a community meeting about this exact same question. I tell you, one of the things that I tell people here is the fact that, George Floyd was killed, and we clearly have all borne eyewitness to that. And it's heartbreaking that we even have to sit and hold our breath to hope that someone will be held accountable for it. Nobody on this call though should be surprised by any of that. And so all that to say, I ran for office on these things. I ran for office to make a difference to these things. We centered our campaign around it 2 years ago. So that is to say that the changes that I'm going to make because of this, we already knew this phenomenon exists in our country, and we started making it 2 years ago. So we have completely updated completely rewritten our police department's use of force. We've completely redefined our K9 unit in our police department, and we've wrapped our city around a public safety philosophy that isn't about what happens just after someone calls 911 and something bad happens, but it's about how we connect our communities to stability and support way ahead of time. So that's in the form of what we call our Community First Public Safety Budget, which funds mental health supports. It funds community-based organizations. It funds what's called like interveners or violence interrupters through what we think of as a public health approach. People talk about public safety as a public health challenge, or gun violence in our communities as a public health challenge. And that's true, but we've continued to say it's a public health challenge, but fund it as just a criminal justice challenge. So we're trying to make those shifts while ensuring the robust civilian oversight that we need and the robust accountability measures so that we can ensure that when officers fall below our standards, that we can hold them accountable as well.
Fantastic. Brother Mayor Carter, are you working with other cities to scale up a lot of these programs? Because they're obviously working. Do you partner with other cities to share a lot of these best practices?
Constantly. And I tell you, we have a lot of good brothers who are mayors of other cities who I am constantly in touch with. We're texting each other and calling each other and trying to figure out the great thing about mayors, and certainly we have a cohort of young African-American mayors across our country in particular, who we're constantly in touch with each other. We're constantly stealing from each other. So for Mayor Woodfin in Birmingham, Alabama, he and I are really good friends constantly. I mean, I think he's done an incredible job, in particular, of communicating with his residents around the COVID crisis and how it impact. We have the same type of budget crises as other cities right now, and that's going to impact all of our public services, not just policing, but it's going to impact all the ways we deliver public services in our city. So we have to communicate very, very intentionally around that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. I want to shift to Brother Sneed, the president in Minneapolis.
Oh, I just lost you. I can't hear you. Are you on mute, or I messed up?
Can you hear me now? Let me make sure. Can everyone hear me? Testing. Can you hear me? Brother Sneed, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay. All right. I'll keep talking. I believe Brother Carter will be able to hear me shortly here. But Brother Sneed, first, thank you so much for joining us. And I wanted to ask you a few things. One, we have 700 plus Alpha chapters across America, but not all of them are on ground zero where the murder of George Floyd occurred. And, how has your chapter responded? How are the brothers doing? I want to ask that question first.
Brother Paul, thank you for this opportunity. And on behalf of Gamma Xi Lambda and the MUTE chapters, which comprise the District of Minnesota, I just want to thank the brothers for your texts, your prayers, your calls, your offers to show up. It has not gone unnoticed. And it's been very reassuring that the brothers from around the world are showing support and showing concern for us. Quite honestly, brothers are struggling. We have our good days, we have our bad days. On top of trying to respond as any good Alpha man would, we have to remember that we are at ground zero. And so we have fathers and partners and business owners who are trying to protect their families, their homes, their businesses, their neighbors, the community at large. And so we have a lot of parts moving, but brothers have good days and bad days, but we know our calling. We know that as Alphas, we said that we would advocate and serve all of our communities. And so we have a lot going on. Right now, we're trying to do a lot of things that I would call immediate responses. So we're raising money through our MU chapter. Our undergraduate chapter is taking the lead with that, and they've raised several thousands of dollars.
I can't hear you. I've lost audio.
And they are actually going and buying supplies, whether it's food or medical supplies, essential supplies, and they're taking them to sites across the city. Because in the aftermath of the murder, there's been a lot of violence. There's been a lot of threats of violence. There's been a lot of looting. And so stores are closed, boarded up, burned down, pharmacies. Even just a couple blocks from me, the neighborhood pharmacy is gone. I work as a college student personnel associate, and many of our students go to that pharmacy to get their meds, and they can't do that. So under the leadership of Brother Storey and the MU chapter, we are raising funds. We are also distributing food and supplies and essentials, working with community organizations and churches. We're working in collaboration with NPHC. We have a strong yet small and mighty NPHC here, so we're working in collaboration. We're also engaging in the business of every day going back out and cleaning the neighborhood after the violence, after the aftermath, after the burning, after the looting, after the broken windows. So we're going into the communities and we are helping to clean. Again, we know that we're brothers first, and so we are attending to the needs of brothers, especially our younger brothers and our brothers who are newer. And so we're really reaching out to every brother that's under 30 or who's been in the chapter less than 5 years, to make sure that that brother has a voice, has a shoulder to lean on. And we're having some tremendous conversations, and it's strengthening our brotherhood. Those are the things that we're doing immediately. We are poised to begin a letter writing campaign, a calling campaign. Brothers are also, I should say, are showing up at protests and the rallies and the vigils. So we're beginning to show our presence in an organized way that way. And we're just beginning to have conversations about how do we want our brothers from the region to show up. And so more to come. We do have our website lists all of our ways that we're being involved and all the ways that brothers can be supported. And that is, I should know it, alphamn.org. alphamn.org. And there's a link on there, and it's called We Can't Breathe. And so if you go there, you'll see 7. It's a powerful, important number. You'll see 7 ways that brothers in the district, in the region, in the general organization can be of support to us. But brothers, we appreciate your help, but we need more because this is hitting home in many, many ways.
Thank you, Brother Sneed. I mean, speaking of hitting home, Brother Carter, we know that our brother said writing is the voice of the unheard. That's basically how people express themselves when they feel like they've been backed into a corner. The only way they can express themselves is by rioting, protesting. Now, what can we do to support your efforts? I think you've done a yeoman's job of keeping things in order. And what can responsible citizens do to express their First Amendment right while providing some real solutions? We know that burning down stores is not the answer, but we understand why someone can express themselves that way. But that's not the answer. That's not the way. We talked about voting earlier, but we'd love to hear from you, Mayor. What do you think we should do? How can people responsibly express their First Amendment right, and while still finding some real solutions?
Look, I appreciate the question. I mean, because we've got 2 kinds of folks right now in our community. We have those who showed up for justice, who showed up for community, who showed up because they just can't sleep while injustices are happening. They can't breathe while injustices are happening. And then we have some folks who came into community to bust windows and to start fires and to perpetuate further injustices that have only hurt in particular our communities of color. As we've lost in my neighborhood, one of the pharmacies, many of the pharmacies that our seniors rely on for, medicine, life-saving medicine in a pandemic. We've lost, the grocery stores that we rely on for food and the food shortage, the places that we go for our jobs in an economic recession. And, there's a million ways we can stand up. Being at the protest, having your bodies on the line is important. Being able to talk to, and that letter writing campaign you're talking about is really important. Elected officials, I know, they know that they can't. They know that they don't hear from everybody. They don't talk to everybody in their community. And so when I hear from somebody, and I'm not just talking about the form letter stuff or the form, forward this email to your senator. When I hear directly from somebody in an email or a letter that they've literally put themselves into, that they've spent time on to create for themselves, that's enormously meaningful. When people stop and take the time to say, hey, I want to tell you what this experience is, that's enormously meaningful. And ultimately, part of my call, as I don't know if you've heard us talking about peace but not patience, part of my call is for all these young people who are in the streets right now. This is the energy that created our country. It's the energy that that abolished slavery. This is the energy that saw us through civil rights. And this is the only energy. The truth is, no matter what I do, my energy by myself can't save the day where St. Paul is concerned. This is the only energy that's going to turn the page to a new chapter. So we're challenging these young people. Don't sit there and beg me and ask me and protest me until I do the right thing. You come and run for office yourself, and let's contest for power ourselves, so that we can know that we've got the folks in decision-making bodies that are representing our interests.
Very well said. Very well said, Mr. Mayor. And while we're on the topic of COVID-19, how has that affected your community? Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor? How has that affected your community as you have individuals who are protesting? And Brother Sneed, you can also answer that as well, because we know that the chapters of Minnesota have been out protesting. But COVID-19 is still very real, and it's still claiming lives, overwhelmingly lives who look like you and I. So what steps is the chapter taking specifically to respond responsibly to the second pandemic, as Brother Blake put earlier?
Great question. We have become, like many chapters, we have become a virtual organization. And as the president charged with running meetings, I will tell you, I was a bit nervous about alphas being online in a meeting, but the meetings have gone very well. We've had elections virtually. We have had social events, and we are turning the page to begin to look at our programming. So not only our national programs, but our local signature programs as well, because we do want to be mindful of COVID-19 and all of its ramifications, but it has definitely altered the functioning, the everyday functioning of our organization.
We definitely had to introduce some digital tools and technology into how we do business. Those are people who actually will be around for tomorrow. If you continue to do business like you were doing last year, those folks have closed their doors. And look, we have brothers who are all across the country, and we're having a conversation in the same room, right? And which is incredible. Brother Mayor Carter, really quickly, as far as COVID-19, we know that it's been ravaging all areas of the United States. And we also see that protesters are out. Some don't have masks. That make me pretty nervous. We also see that the cases are increasing, et cetera. How has these protests and COVID-19, is that a combination for disaster? How has that affected your city? Have you seen an increase, an uptick in cases due to the protests?
Not yet, but we also know that there's a delay there, and we also know that there's a testing disparity. So all of those folks may not get tested so that we'll know. We've been working to try to make sure there's testing available, working with our National Guard to try to make sure testing is available, that it's affordable. And then the question is treatment. Can people afford treatment? So how do we do that as well? We are absolutely concerned that, short of, frankly, a miracle, these demonstrations we've seen are likely to be a set of super spreader events, and that in a couple of weeks we will see that type of spike that you're talking about. Just on the question you asked just before, I would also say we're learning, and I know I imagine Brother Sneed might have spoken to this. We're also learning that we can be much more fraternal than we've been, and as we've had frat nights and not just conducted the business but conducted the social side, the more intimate contacts side. as well. And I think we're learning that we can use technology in the future to be far more fraternal than we've been. And my hope is that that's something that will continue beyond this age of pandemic and quarantine.
Indeed. I mean, we've learned a lot, even at HQ, about how to use these tools to engage our brothers. Look at the conversation that we're having now. No one knows that better than our fearless leader, General President Dr. Everett B. Ward. When we were looking at how COVID-19 was affecting the brotherhood, the brother president went right into action and formed the COVID-19 task force. You name it. Brother President, I don't want to steal your thunder. If you'd like to share a little bit about really what you did under your leadership and what we've been able to do in order to respond to this very real pandemic.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you for your leadership. I'm just so proud of you as Alpha Brothers. I wish you could sit where I am and you can see brothers giving leadership in every aspect in the situation that we're facing with COVID-19 and also the untimely and devastating murder of George Floyd. Brother Mayor, I want to tell you how proud we are of the leadership that you're giving. And Brother Sneed and I, we've talked several times and learning of what the brothers are doing. But then to hear from our brothers tonight, Brother Dr. Webb and Brother Blake and Brother Warnock, all standing forward to give leadership. And what I believe more than anything else is your General President is we've got to, as Brother William Barber said last night, we've got to intensify and put pressure on injustice. And I'm so glad to see our brothers standing up in every place in America, giving leadership. And it's going to be a difficult road ahead, but guess what? We are alphas. We're used to that. And we shall prevail and continue to give leadership. But as far as the COVID-19, we appointed a task force under the leadership of Brother Dr. Ron Peters with a host of medical doctors and health professionals, public health researchers. But we know that this road is long, and we can expect that we will have a second round of that. But what I'd like to talk with you all about is going forward. Too often we get caught up in the issue of the day, but I want you to share with us the tomorrow and the actions. That's what I'm hearing from brothers all over the country. What is the next action steps that we need to take as a brotherhood? So I'd like for you all to give us some recommendations on the action steps that we need to take. I know Brother Webb, Brother Blake will tell us immediately, get them elected. And Brother Warnock would say, get him elected in November. And I'm in full agreement with that. But I'd like to hear what some of your recommendations are that the brothers can do both immediately and long term to deal with the issues that we have in front of us.
We'll start with Brother Mayor Carter, and then Brother Webb will round us out.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate the question and the introduction. I think brothers being available, brothers being out in community is very important. I think helping, particularly in our communities where we see, those Black-owned businesses.
Brother Webb, if you don't mind picking up where our dear Brother Carter left off, that would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we've talked about so many of those critical things that we need to do right now. I think it's a matter of us stepping up, standing up, being the leaders in our community that we've been called to be. And I think that's what's most needed right now. I think this isn't a time for us to be timid or to be shy. I think this is a time for us to use our voices. And I keep going back to, I'm a Christian man. I keep going back to the word and keep understanding that we are appointed to spaces for certain times, for certain seasons. And I think that in this moment, brothers are alpha all over this country. It's our job to really lean in and use our voices in our respective stations. And that's not always comfortable. But I think that there is a critical need for it right now. And there's a critical impact for it right now, an outsized impact to what we usually have. And And I have to quickly say, we've talked about protesting and the impact of protesting in this current conversation. And it's important for me to know, as a physician, I've been saying for weeks on end, stay in your houses, right? I've been telling folks, stay in your homes. We don't want to spread COVID. It's disproportionately hurting Black and brown individuals. And then for the last week, I've been saying, take to the streets, and so there's a cognitive dissonance there. There's something that doesn't quite compute. And the reason is there are two public health crises, right? We've got a crisis of COVID, we've got a crisis of the killing of Black men. And so what I'll add to that is we've got to be those leaders in our community who could speak up with thoughtfulness, but also who can keep in mind all of the things that are at stake right now. So we have to be out there saying, put a mask on when you're out here protesting, keep your 6 feet of distance, let's be smart about this, let's make some noise, but let's do it in a thoughtful way. So I think, I think there's so much that we need to be doing in all of our spaces. Someone pointed out earlier that, yes, there's racial injustice in our criminal justice system. There's racial injustice in all of our society systems. So if your space is education, now is the time to act up, to stand up and speak out. If your space is healthcare, if your space is, transportation, whatever it may be, use this moment to leverage all of the energy, all the momentum that we have to press.
Fantastic. Very well said, Brother Dr. Webb. Brother Sneed, do you want to add to those comments? What can we do? I believe that amongst these protests is the next Dr. Martin Luther King. I really do. I believe someone will rise from these ashes like a phoenix, and be able to be the voice that we need to lead us, help us move forward. So, Brother Sneed, your response? Brother Sneed is ice cold.
Yes, look like he's frozen.
All right, Brother Sneed is ice cold. So this is good. This is good. This actually helps us round out our conversation. Before we allow our General President to give us some final words, definitely want to take this point of personal privilege to thank every single one of our brothers who gave up part of their evening, not only our panel, but the ones who joined us to show up. We cannot do this without you. We will not do this without you. We're working extremely hard at headquarters to make sure that we provide some real solutions. We know, Brother General President and I talk every day, and we know that you're calling. We hear you. And this is one of the ways that we're responding. We have many more solutions coming, but we can't do it without you. We want you to bring your ideas to us, bring those solutions to us, and together we can attack this problem together. So, Brother General President, if you would please finish us off, and we will wrap up our conversation.
Thank you, Brother Paul. And again, to all of our participants, Brother Moriel, National President of the National Urban League, who does an outstanding job of leading the National Urban League and being a voice for the voiceless in this country. We want to thank him. And again, to our brothers, Brother Webb, Brother Blake, and to Brother Warnock, candidates who have stepped forward and said that, here I am, send me, I'm willing to serve. And to our brothers, Brother Sneed and Brother Carter, who are on the front line every single day in St. Paul's, Minnesota, as well as there in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We are not going to forget the life of George Floyd, and our fraternity is joining with partners all over this country to make sure that we indeed fight against racism and injustice and discrimination in every hamlet. I want to thank the brothers for joining what is the first series of a great series, Alpha Advocacy in Action. I know Brother Paul's going to talk to you about our next series webinar that'll be coming up. But thank you for what you're doing. We're going to work together and continue to be, first of all, servants of all as we transcend all. Thank you, brothers. And as Brother Mayor Carter said, we're using this new medium technology to keep the brotherhood informed and make certain that we stay connected as a brotherhood. Thank you, and God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you, President Ward. Folks, as the president mentioned, we have a part 2 coming with our very good brother who's going to be here on the 16th, Brother Roland Martin. So stay tuned for information about Brother Roland Martin, who's joining us. We want to say thank you for joining us on part 1 of federal policy in the age of COVID-19 and the violent assault on Black men. I'm Joe Paul. On behalf of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, thank you. God bless you. Take care.